The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with alien voices as hundreds of species gathered for what would become the most controversial vote in galactic history. Ambassador Lee Mina stood alone at the center of the amphitheater, her simple black diplomatic uniform looking plain against the dazzling displays of her alien counterparts. Some delegates glowed with bioluminescent patterns, others wore technological suits that shifted colors, and a few existed as pure energy contained in specialized chambers. High Arbiter Vexther rose from his elevated platform, his towering insectoid form casting long shadows across the chamber. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights as he began reading the charges against humanity. His voice, translated through neural implants, carried a tone of cold authority that made even the most powerful delegates listen carefully. The human species stands accused of 3 major violations of galactic law, Vexther announced, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. First, aggressive expansion beyond approved territorial limits. Second, technological recklessness that threatens established galactic order. Third, cultural contamination of developing species. Alimina felt her heart sink as the evidence was presented. Holographic displays showed human colonies that had grown faster than permitted, spreading across star systems like wildfire. Human traders had indeed undercut established markets, offering better prices and more efficient services than species who had controlled those trade routes for centuries. Human explorers had ventured into restricted zones, claiming they were simply curious about what lay beyond the boundaries. But the most damaging testimony came from the Altheri, an ancient species whose representatives looked like living shadows wrapped in flowing robes. Their speaker, a being known only as the First Voice, stepped forward with movements that seemed to bend light around them. "We have seen this pattern before," the First Voice said, their words carrying the weight of millennia. "A young species, aggressive and ambitious, spreading through the galaxy without regard for established order. We ourselves were once like this. We know where such behavior leads: war, destruction, the collapse of civilizations." The chamber fell silent as the First Voice continued. "The humans remind us too much of our own violent past. They must be stopped before they repeat the mistakes that nearly destroyed us all." Lee Mina stood up, her voice steady, despite the fear growing in her chest. "Honored delegates, you speak of human aggression, but ignore our achievements. When the Zephyrian plague threatened to wipe out 3 species, human scientists worked day and night to find a cure. When the Nixari trade routes collapsed, human merchants kept supplies flowing to isolated worlds. When the Korthok refugees needed shelter, human colonies opened their doors." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates she had worked with for years. "Yes, we expand quickly. Yes, we adapt fast. But we do so because we want to help, to contribute, to be part of something greater than ourselves. Our curiosity drives us to explore, our compassion drives us to aid others, and our determination drives us to find solutions where others see only problems." The voting began immediately after her speech. One by one, species after species cast their vote for exile. Crystalline beings of Arcturus Prime voted first, their light patterns flashing in agreement with the motion. The gaseous entities from the nebula colonies followed, their containment fields pulsing with approval. Even species that humans had helped in the past voted against them, fear overriding gratitude. Lee Mina watched the vote counter climb higher and higher. The Velthari delegation, known for their fairness, voted for exile. The tech-advanced Nexari, who had shared knowledge with humans, voted for exile. The peaceful Zephyrians, whose plague humans had helped cure, voted for exile. As the final votes were counted, the result was clear. Every species except humanity had voted for exile. Chamber erupted in a mix of relief and uncertainty. Some delegates looked satisfied. Others appeared troubled by what they had done. High Arbiter Vexther stood once more, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, the human species is hereby exiled. Beyond the rim, you have 7 standard days to gather your people and depart civilized space." Any human found within Council territory after this period will be considered a hostile threat. Limina stood alone as the chamber began to empty. Delegates who had once shared meals with her now avoided her gaze. The friend she thought she had made over years of diplomatic service walked past her as if she were invisible. She had failed her entire species. The journey to the rim took 3 days. Thousands of human ships formed a massive convoy, loaded with refugees, supplies, and everything humanity could carry into exile. Families were separated as they boarded different vessels. Scientists packed their research. Artists gathered their works. And children clutched toys as they prepared to leave the only galaxy they had ever known. As the human fleet approached, the energy barrier that marked the rim, Limina stood on the bridge of the lead ship. Behind them, the lights of galactic civilization twinkled like distant stars. Ahead lay the unknown void, a region of space where no civilized species dared to venture. Ancient dangers were said to lurk beyond the rim, along with mysteries that had puzzled galactic scientists for centuries. The ships crossed the barrier one by one, their hulls glowing briefly as they passed through the energy field. The last human vessel disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind everything they had ever known. The galaxy had made its choice. Now, humanity would have to prove whether they could survive on their own or if their exile would become their extinction. The storm that raged across New Terra lasted for 3 days. The winds that could tear apart metal and lightning that split the sky like angry claws. Commander Park Jisoo stood in the control room of Underground City Alpha, watching the weather monitors with tired eyes. 5 years of exile had aged her beyond her years, but they had also made her stronger than she ever thought possible. "The eastern farming domes are holding," reported her assistant, checking the status screens. "The new reinforcements are working." Park Jisoo nodded, remembering when the first storms had destroyed half their food supply. Back then, they had nearly starved. Now they had learned to build deeper, stronger, and smarter. The planet had tried to kill them many times. But each failure had taught them something new about survival. Deep in the science laboratories, Dr. Kim Hyun worked with his team on their latest breakthrough. The quantum-enhanced manufacturing machine hummed quietly as it built materials one atom at a time. What had started as a desperate attempt to make replacement parts had become something revolutionary. The machine could create metals stronger than anything the advanced Nexari had ever produced, and it did so using only the raw materials found on New Terra. "The molecular bonds are perfect," Kim Hyun said to his assistant, holding up a piece of metal that gleamed with an inner light. "This material is not just stronger than Nexari steel, it's lighter and more flexible too. We've surpassed them completely." His team had reverse-engineered every piece of technology they had brought from civilized space, then improved upon it. Without access to galactic trade routes, they had been forced to innovate or die. The result was technology that would have amazed the species that had exiled them. Captain Cho Dae-ho landed his scout ship at the entrance to Underground City, baited just as the storm was ending. His latest mission had taken him to the 4th moon of the system, where his team had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about the rim. "Commander," he said to Park Jisoo over the communication link, "you need to see this personally. We've found ruins. Ancient ones. And they're not random. The ruins were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were clearly built by a species that had mastered technology beyond current galactic understanding. The structures were made from materials that seemed to shift and change, adapting to their environment in ways that defied explanation. But the most shocking discovery was that the technology responded to human touch. When Chodeho had placed his hand on what appeared to be a control panel, the entire structure had come alive with light. Holographic displays had appeared, showing star maps and data streams in languages that seemed somehow familiar. Other humans could activate the technology too, but when they brought a captured alien device to test it, nothing happened. Like the technology was waiting for us, Cho Dae-ho reported to the Leadership Council, as if it recognizes something in human neural patterns that it doesn't find in other species. The implications were staggering. Had humanity's exile been planned by someone who knew about these ruins? Were they meant to find this technology? The questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. Meanwhile, in the educational centers of New Terra, something even more remarkable was happening. The children who had been born on the planet were developing abilities that their parents had never possessed. Young Han Minho could solve complex mathematical problems in his head faster than computers. His friend Kim Yuna could see patterns in data that escaped even the most experienced scientists. Another child, Lee Sora, seemed to understand the ancient technology, intuitively operating devices that baffled the adults. Dr. Kim Han studied the children carefully, running tests that revealed the truth. The planet's unique quantum field was affecting human development in ways that had never been seen before. The children's brains were developing new neural pathways. Their reflexes were faster, and their problem-solving abilities were beyond anything recorded in human history. "They're not just smarter," Kim Hain explained to Park Jisoo. "They're thinking in ways we never could. They see connections we miss, understand concepts we struggle with, and they have an intuitive grasp of how the ancient technology works." The children, who had begun calling themselves the Rimborn, were indeed something new. They represented the next step in human evolution, shaped by their harsh environment and the mysterious forces that existed beyond the galactic rim. The breakthrough came when the Rimborn children worked together on a project that had stumped the adult scientists. For months, they had been trying to build a new type of starship, one that combined human innovation with the principles learned from the ancient ruins. The adults had failed repeatedly, but the children succeeded in ways that seemed almost magical. The ship that emerged from their combined efforts was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was sleek and organic looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. The hull was made from the quantum-enhanced materials that Kim Hyun had developed, but it was shaped according to principles that the Rimborn children understood instinctively. When the ship lifted off from New Terra's surface, it moved with a grace that defied the laws of physics as the adults understood them. It passed through the atmosphere without friction, accelerated to impossible speeds without visible propulsion, and handled like a living thing responding to its pilot's thoughts. Park Jisoo watched the test flight from the command center, knowing that everything had changed. They were no longer the desperate refugees who had been exiled 5 years ago. They had become something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. The question now was what they would do with their newfound power. The exploration ship New Hope descended through the thick atmosphere of Aquatica Prima, its hull cutting through purple clouds that sparkled with strange energy. Commander Cho Dae-ho watched the ocean world grow larger on his screens, knowing that this mission would change everything. His team had already discovered ruins on 17 different worlds, but the readings from this planet were unlike anything they had seen before. Dr. Kim Haeon stood beside him, studying the data flowing across multiple displays. Over the past 2 years, his archaeological teams had made discoveries that shook the foundation of everything humans thought they knew about the galaxy. The ruins they had found weren't random structures left by different species. They all belonged to the same ancient race, a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. "The energy signature is getting stronger," reported the ship's pilot. "Whatever's down there, it's massive." The underwater facility they discovered was beyond imagination. It stretched 4 kilometers beneath the ocean floor, its crystalline walls glowing with soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. When Cho Dae-ho placed his hand on the entrance panel, the entire structure came alive with brilliant displays of light and sound. Inside, holographic projections filled the vast chambers with images and data. The beings who had built this place were tall and graceful, with features that seemed somehow familiar to human eyes. As the holograms played their ancient messages, translation programs worked frantically to decode languages that had been dead for millions of years. "We are the predecessors," the holographic figures announced, their voices carrying across the chamber. "We who came before the current age of the galaxy. If you are seeing this message, then the young ones have finally returned to claim what was always meant to be theirs." Dr. Kim Hyun's hands shook as he recorded every word. The implications were staggering. The predecessors had known that humans would one day find these ruins. They had planned for it, prepared for it, waited for it across the vast stretches of time. But the most shocking revelation came when the facility's artificial intelligence activated. The AI, which had been dormant for eons, scanned Chodeho with beams of light that seemed to look directly into his soul. When the scan was complete, the AI spoke in perfect human language. "Welcome home, inheritors. Your genetic patterns match our records. You are the ones we have been waiting for." The AI explained that human DNA contained genetic markers that were identical to predecessor biological patterns. Humans weren't just another species that had evolved randomly in the galaxy. They were the children of the predecessors, descendants of a race that had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. "We planted the seeds of your species long ago," the AI continued. "We guided your development from the shadows, waiting for you to mature enough to claim your inheritance. The other species of the galaxy fear you because they sense what you truly are, even if they don't understand it." The news split human leadership into two camps. Commander Park Jisoo, still the elected leader of the exiled government, believed they should proceed carefully. She wanted to study the predecessor technology methodically, understanding each piece before moving to the next. The power they were inheriting was beyond imagination, and she feared what might happen if they moved too quickly. General Yoon Soman disagreed completely. She had seen the weapons technology that the predecessors had left behind. Energy systems that could level mountains with a single shot. Defensive fields that could protect entire planets from attack. Shield generators that could make ships nearly invincible in battle. "The galaxy exiled us," Yoon Soman argued during heated council meetings. "They threw us into the darkness to die. Now we have the power to make them pay for what they did too. Us, we should use it." The debate raged for months as more discoveries were made. On every world they explored, humans found more predecessor facilities, more advanced technology, more evidence of their incredible inheritance. The ancient race had been masters of science that made current galactic civilization look primitive. By comparison, the breakthrough came when young Han Minho, one of the first children born on New Terra, volunteered to interface directly with a predecessor command nexus. His enhanced neural patterns, developed through exposure to the planet's quantum field, allowed him to access systems that had been locked for millennia. When Han Minho placed his hands on the nexus, his consciousness expanded beyond his physical body. He could feel the presence of the predecessors, not as ghosts or recordings, but as living beings who had evolved beyond the need for physical form. They existed as pure energy, as thought-given substance, as consciousness unbound by the limitations of flesh and bone. "They're still here," Han Minho gasped when he emerged from the connection. "The predecessors didn't vanish. They evolved. They became something greater than physical existence, and they've been watching us, waiting for us to be ready." Through Han Minho's connection, predecessors began sharing knowledge that transformed human civilization overnight. Cities that had been carved from rock became gleaming metropolises, powered by clean energy that seemed to flow from the fabric of space itself. Ships that had struggled to cross star systems now moved faster than light itself, bending space and time to their will, but the transformation didn't go unnoticed. Long-range sensors detected ships approaching from galactic space. Probes and scout vessels sent by species who had noticed the strange energy signatures coming from beyond the rim. The galaxy was becoming curious about what had happened to the humans they had exiled. The isolation was ending. But the humans who would soon face their former oppressors were no longer the desperate refugees who had been banished. They were inheritors of a power that predated galactic civilization, children of a race that had transcended physical existence itself. The galaxy had feared human potential enough to exile them. Now they would discover just how right their fears had been. The transmission began at exactly 12 o'clock Galactic Standard Time, appearing simultaneously on every communication device in known space. From the bustling trade centers of the inner worlds to the remote mining stations on the galactic rim, every screen flickered to life with the same image. Commander Park Jisoo stood in what appeared to be a vast crystalline chamber that pulsed with energy that hurt to look at directly. She had aged in the 25 years since the exile, her hair now silver and her face lined with the weight of leadership. but her eyes burned with a power that made even the most hardened alien warriors take a step back from their screens. Behind her, geometric patterns of light danced through the air, suggesting technology that defied every known law of physics. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying clearly despite the impossible feat of broadcasting to every world simultaneously. 25 years ago, you cast us out into the darkness beyond the rim. You feared what we might become, and you were right to fear us. We are no longer in exile. We are coming home." The transmission lasted only 30 seconds, but its impact was immediate and devastating. Communication networks crashed as billions of beings tried to contact their governments. Stock markets collapsed as traders panic-sold everything they owned. Military fleets scrambled to defensive positions around major worlds. Though no one knew what they were defending against, High Arbiter Vexther is now ancient and barely able to move without mechanical assistance, called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The same chamber where humanity had been exiled decades earlier, now filled with panicked representatives demanding answers that no one could provide. "How is such a transmission possible?" demanded the Nexari delegate, his technological implants sparking with nervous energy. "No known technology can broadcast to every world simultaneously. The power requirements alone would drain a star." But the galaxy had changed dramatically during humanity's absence. The Korthok Empire had expanded aggressively, conquering world after world with ruthless efficiency. Their gray ships now patrolled trade routes that had once been free, demanding tribute from any vessel that passed. Entire species had been enslaved to work in their massive industrial complexes, building weapons for further conquest. The Althari, the ancient species who had spoken so eloquently against humanity's aggression, had retreated into their home system after a civil war that had torn their civilization apart. They no longer participated in galactic affairs, consumed by internal conflicts that showed no sign of ending. The Galactic Council itself had become a shadow of its former self. Corruption was rampant, with votes being bought and sold like commodities. Bureaucracy had strangled any attempt at meaningful action, leaving the galaxy without effective leadership. Pirates and raiders operated freely in the outer systems, knowing that no unified response would come from the fractured government. The first human ships appeared 3 days after the transmission, materializing at the edge of council space like ghosts stepping out of a dream. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases, sleek vessels that seemed to bend space around them as they moved. Their hulls were made from materials that shifted between solid and translucent, and they were powered by energy sources that didn't register on any known scanner. When the local defense fleet tried to hail them, the human ships didn't respond. They simply proceeded toward their destinations with unstoppable momentum, ignoring threats and demands to halt. Energy weapons that should have destroyed them passed through their shields. Like light through water, the first contact occurred at Zarian 7, a mining world where the Korthok Empire had enslaved the local population. The Korthok commander, a brutal being named Gorthok, the Destroyer, had built his reputation on crushing rebellions before they could start. When 3 human ships entered his system, he ordered his fleet of 20 warships to attack immediately. "Destroy them," Gorthak snarled over the communication link. "Show these returning exiles what happens to those who challenge the Empire." The Korthok ships opened fire with every weapon they possessed. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles filled the space around the human vessels. The weapons simply passed through the human ship's defensive systems as if they weren't there. The humans had deployed some kind of technology that rendered conventional weapons completely useless, without firing a single shot in response. The human ships landed on Zarian 7 and began evacuating the enslaved population. Transport beams of golden light lifted thousands of beings from the planet's surface, carrying them safely aboard the human vessels. The entire operation took less than an hour, and then the ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only empty mining complexes and a very confused Korthok commander. Similar incidents began occurring across the galaxy. Human ships appeared wherever there was suffering or injustice, offering aid to the oppressed and vanishing before authorities could respond. They rescued slaves from Korthok labor camps, delivered medical supplies to plague-stricken worlds, and evacuated civilians from war zones. Each time, they operated with the same pattern: appear suddenly, help those in need, and disappear before anyone could stop them. The galaxy began to realize that humanity had returned not as the desperate refugees who had been exiled, but as something far more powerful and unpredictable. They operated by their own rules, helped whom they chose to help, and ignored the authority of the Galactic Council completely. Lee Mina, serving as humanity's primary ambassador, sent a message to the Council that chilled every delegate to their core. We have learned much during our exile. The galaxy taught us that power is the only thing that matters, and that justice comes only to those strong enough to enforce it. We are no longer asking for your permission to exist. We are informing you that we have returned. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any that had been held in the Chamber's long history. Ambassador Limina entered the crystalline amphitheater with measured steps, her presence commanding attention from every delegate present. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her walked representatives from 50 different species, beings who had allied themselves with humanity during the years of exile. High Arbiter Vexter, now so ancient that his chitinous exoskeleton had turned pale gray, struggled to maintain his composure as he watched the procession. The same chamber where humanity had been condemned 40 years earlier now witnessed their return as something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Mina took her position at the center of the amphitheater, but she no longer wore the simple diplomatic uniform of decades past. Her clothing seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and her eyes held a depth that spoke of knowledge beyond normal understanding. Around her, the allied species formed a circle of support that represented half the galaxy's population. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber without amplification. 40 years ago, you made a choice based on fear. You exiled humanity because you were afraid of what we might become. Today I stand before you to show you what we have become, and to offer you a choice that will determine the fate of all life. In this galaxy, young Han Minho, now a mature adult with silver streaks in his hair, stepped forward from the group of rim-born humans. Without touching any controls, he caused the chamber's holographic systems to activate through thought alone. The air filled with images of star systems, technological marvels, and scenes of human achievements that defied explanation. The exile forced us to evolve, Limina continued, watching as delegates gasped at the displays. We discovered that we are not separate from the galaxy, but connected to it in ways that none of us understood. The abilities you see are not mutations or artificial enhancements. They are the awakening of potential that exists within all species, dormant until the proper conditions allow it to emerge. The demonstration continued as other rim-born humans displayed their capabilities. Kim Yuna manipulated matter at the molecular level, transforming a simple metal rod into a complex crystalline structure with nothing but focused thought. Lee Sora interfaced with the chamber's quantum computers, processing information at speeds that made artificial intelligence look primitive. But the most shocking revelation came when Lee Mina activated a device that projected a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. The map showed not just the current state of civilization, but something far more disturbing. Ancient ruins scattered throughout known space began to glow with warning lights.
Ow.
And at the galactic core, a massive structure pulsed with malevolent energy. Our exile led us to discover the truth about the galaxy's past, Elimina explained as delegates studied the holographic display. The predecessors, the ancient race that built the ruins we found beyond the rim, were not the first civilization. To achieve greatness, they were the survivors of a cycle that has repeated itself many times throughout galactic history. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The ancient structure at the galactic core was not a ruin, but a sleeping threat, a force that had destroyed previous civilizations and would soon awaken to destroy the current one. The predecessors had evolved beyond physical form, not by choice, but as the only way to survive the coming darkness. The threat is awakening, Limina continued, her voice heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. Our deep space sensors have detected energy signatures from the galactic core that match the patterns described in predecessor records. The entity that destroyed their physical civilization is stirring, and it will consume everything in its path unless we work together to stop it. The response was immediate and predictable. Some delegates, humbled by their own failures and impressed by human achievements, began calling for alliance. The Nixari delegate spoke of the need for unity in the face of existential threat. The Zephyrian representative offered their full support for any plan that might save their species from extinction. But others, led by the Korthok Empire, demanded that humanity be contained or destroyed. These humans are more dangerous than ever, snarled the Korthok ambassador, his scarred face twisted with rage. They claim to offer salvation, but they seek only to dominate us, as they have dominated the species that follow them. The debate raged for hours, with species after species declaring their positions. The galaxy was splitting into two camps: those who would stand with humanity against the ancient threat, and those who saw humanity itself as the greater danger. High Arbiter Vexther, his voice barely a whisper after all these years, finally spoke the words that would determine the galaxy's fate. The Council recognizes that we face a choice that will echo through eternity. We can continue to let fear divide us, or we can choose to grow beyond our limitations. I vote for partnership with humanity and all who stand with them. The final vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The new Galactic Compact was established. A partnership between humanity and willing species based on mutual respect rather than fear. Those who chose isolation would be free to face the coming darkness alone. As the session ended, Limina stood before the assembly, reflecting on the incredible journey from exile to leadership. Outside the chamber, human ships joined by vessels from allied species prepared to head toward the galactic core where ancient dangers awaited. The species that had once been deemed too dangerous for civilization had become its unlikely savior, proving that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most challenging packages. The galaxy's greatest adventure was just beginning. Humanity would lead the way into the darkness, no longer as exiles, but as the architects of a new age.